All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm putting together this quick video as a little bit of a reading guide for you. You're starting this text. Some of you may have already begun it. This is our book for the week, Holy the Firm, by Annie Dillard. The section that we're in right now in the class has to do with seeking and talking about actually seeking after God and the experience of the mystic. So I just want to give you a few pointers for reading this book so that you don't become frustrated or confused by it, because it's very different from the other things that we've read. This week we're going to have an online discussion earlier in the week, so we'll be doing that tomorrow afternoon, and then discussion questions later in the week, so that we can get off the ground. So I'll be sending you an invitation to that in just a moment. But just a couple of things that you need to think about as you begin Holy the Firm. So Annie Dillard is still alive. She is a poet and a writer, a novelist, and her theology is closely connected to the contemplative or mystical strain. So she is a person who is trying to describe, she's not interpreting the Bible, she's not interpreting the tradition, so much as she is trying to describe who God is. And then since that's such a very difficult thing to do, and since God is beyond our ability to describe, that makes the book confusing. Okay, so first thing you need to know is that she's trying to talk about God's nature. And that's the reason why I always teach this book, because even though it's difficult, I think she shows us that talking about God is serious business and that it's not going to be easy. If somebody gives you a God that's easy to understand, I would be suspicious of that. There are 4 themes in this book that you can look for. First, she's talking about the presence of God in the world, and that's what the first part of the book is, where she's describing the natural world. That's where Annie Dillard meets God, in the natural world. Not so much in church, not so much in in the tradition, but in the natural world. That's where she meets God. Her second theme, which is where she turns in the second book, or the second chapter of this short book, is the presence of evil in the world. The presence of suffering. So if God exists, then why is there suffering in the world? And that may be a question that many people are asking today, and that there's a name for that question. It's a theological term called theodicy, Theodicy. So the theme of theodicy: why is there evil? Why is there suffering? If God exists, then God is good. Another theme of the book has to do with mysticism. And the loss of self, the desire to become one with God that she experiences. And she also talks about the nature of faith. What does it mean to have faith in God? So those are really the 4 themes of the book. Dillard, as I said, she's still alive. She's, I think, in her 70s now. But when she was in her 20s, she won the Pulitzer Prize for literature for a book called The Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Very unusual for someone as young as that to win the Pulitzer Prize. She may be the youngest person to have ever done it. And that book is also about the natural world and about experiencing the divine in the natural world. So that's just a little bit of a background about her. As I said, she's a mystic. And I'm going to give you a definition of a mystic that will help you as you think about her. Most of us are not mystics. We don't experience God in this unmediated way where God is right here present with us. If we did, it would be kind of hard to go through regular life, right? You have to have, most people have that distance where they think about God and they wonder about God, but they aren't experiencing God in the immediate sense. Dillard in this book is experiencing God's unmediated presence, and that's what a mystic is. A mystic is someone who experiences and then tries to describe. Well, if they don't describe it, then we would never know about it. So it's the experience and then the attempted description of an unmediated presence of God. And mediated means that there's something in between. The mystic experiences God directly. So Dillard is not a pastor. She's not trying to help us understand. She's not trying to explain things in a simple way. And that might at first make you feel frustrated with her. But I think if you know what she's trying to do, which is actually describe God, then you can both give yourself permission to not understand everything she says and allow yourself to play around with this text a little bit, much as you would a poem or another type of literary text where the meaning is sometimes obscure, right? So don't think that you have to read this and understand every word of it on your first go around. That's why we're reading it a couple times this week, because each time you read it, you get more from it. I don't know if you can see my copy here. I've got underlining in about 6 different colors of pen plus pencil. Every single time I read this book, I find new things about it. So you're going through it for the first time. Take a look at what stands out to you and what you notice, what seems difficult. If you put a bunch of question marks in the margin, I want to hear about it. I want to know what it is that's making you question what passages are puzzling to you. Be an active reader of this text. I think it has a lot to offer us, especially during this time. I'm going to point out a couple of particular parts of the book that I will be talking about, especially in the first section, that you need to pay attention to. I want you to look at page 13, where she's describing the spider in the bathroom, and think about what that has to do with God and theology. I also want you to pay really close attention to the section that begins on page 14, where she's talking about the moth and the candle. This is one of the most famous passages in this book and often anthologized, and other, kind of pulled out and taken on its own. So we're going to spend some time talking about what the moth and the candle means. And I want you to think about what this metaphor of the God of today means. So the very first line of Holy the Firm is every day is a God, each day is a God, and holiness holds forth in time. If you can understand the first line of each chapter of this, you can understand kind of the point of the whole chapter. And so she calls each day a God with a lowercase g, and that's a metaphor. We just spent the last text that we read, Sally McFaig is describing metaphorical theology. Well, here Annie Dillard is doing metaphorical theology. She's describing God in metaphor, since that's really the only way it's possible to describe God. And so one of her metaphors is each day is a God. So I want to talk about that as well. Okay, so read it through, underline what you want, write down the passages that are puzzling or interesting to you. Remember that she's a mystic. She's describing what's essentially indescribable, and give yourself permission to read this book in a creative way, much as you would a poem. I want you to think about the spider in the bathroom, page 13, page 14, the moth and the candle, and in particular, the overarching metaphor of the first part of the book, the God of today. Okay, hope that's helpful. I'll send out an invitation to discuss this tomorrow during our class time, and we'll see you then.